Hey y'all, this is BJ from American Aquarium, and you're listening to the Neon Eon.
Hey y'all, welcome back to the Neon Eon. I'm so glad you tuned in on the old podcast radio dial. I'm your host, music journalist Thomas Mooney, and today we have our first present day artist on the old Neon Eon. I spoke with BJ Barham of American Aquarium yesterday. BJ's long been a pal and a great interview over the years. It's honestly probably been close to a decade ago since that very first interview. That's what's kind of funny about this episode, actually. While I was prepping and listening to the new record, I was thinking about how we've talked at length for, hours probably about how the alt-country greats of the late 90s and the early 2000s and how the songwriters like Springsteen influenced the American Aquarium sound, that brand of storytelling, and often they've been a key function to the way BJ romanticized his version of the South, being in a band out on the road, and his version of rural North Carolina. If you've listened to the previous American Aquarium albums, that's probably all super apparent, but it's fairly safe to say now that the country radio stars of the late 80s and early 90s, they're just as integral. They too laid some of that foundation for BJ's style of writing. I think you can very much see that in the way he often mixes plain-spoken narrative and regional expressions and idioms. And you can't tell me you don't hear that same thing happening on songs like Queen of My Double Wide Trailer, or I Try and Think About Elvis, or John Deere Green. It's all part of that mix right there too. And it's been there really the whole time. But with a project like this, it just makes it stand out a little bit more. Which of course, I guess I haven't even mentioned that yet. But today, Friday, May 7th, American Aquarium released Slappers, Bangers, and Certified Twangers Volume 1. It's a collection of 90s country covers, and it absolutely hits the mark. It really is something that was just kind of necessary for this year, all things considered. On this one right here, we talk about those songs and those memories attached to those songs, the process and the inspiration. This very well may be the best type of album to have its roots as a quarantine project. The Neon Eon is exclusively presented with limited interruption by Burn Vodka. The award-winning vodka is a product of the Panhandle Plains of West Texas. While Burn Vodka is still a new and fresh brand within the world of spirits and vodka, it was initially formulated in the heart of the Lubbock, Texas music scene and was first introduced at the Blue Light Live, where it soon became a signature shot demanded by musicians, Blue Light loyalists, and newcomers all the same. Now, what is Burn Vodka? It's a habanero flavored vodka that has just the right kick and a smooth, delayed heat that leaves you desiring more. Again, ask any band who has graced the Blue Light stage their thoughts on the signature shot and watch their eyes light up. It's like a secret handshake, and I guarantee you'll get a story or two out of them about the legendary venue and storied Burn Vodka shot. Head on over to theburnvodka.com for more information such as where to find Burn Vodka, merchandise such as caps and t-shirts, and the all too important recipe corner. Currently, Burn Vodka is available primarily here in Texas, but is rapidly expanding to the shelves of your local watering hole and liquor store. Again, that's theburnvodka.com. I'll have links to the website in the show notes, as well as where to follow them on Facebook and Instagram. If this is your first time listening to the Neon Eon, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I just launched this podcast back in January, and I've had a stellar roster of guests so far, but of course, it's still growing, so it's really paramount that you hit that subscribe button, leave a 5-star review, and then of course, tell all your buddies and pals about the Neon Eon. Speaking of slappers, bangers, and certified twangers, if you haven't stopped on over at the Neon Eon merch store, you really ought to do that. Go over to theneoneon.bigcartel.com for all your Neon Eon merch. My buddy Stony Wayne Bass is the one who designed all the latest logos, and I couldn't be more excited. I knew they would look cool, but he absolutely blew me away whenever he sent them over. Obviously, they have that retro feel to them because they are so informed by the 90s country fashion. In particular, that Neon Eon cowboy hat is straight up pure country, dusty, inspired. Anyway, they're all really, really super slick. Again, that's the neoneon.bigcartel.com. And of course, if you're wanting even more podcasts with Americana, country, and rock songwriters, go check out New Slang, which is my other podcast. Plenty of great guests over there as well. BJ's been on there a few times. American Aquarium is coming to Lubbock in late June with Morgan Wade. I don't know, maybe something really cool is in the early works. So yeah, go subscribe. Links to everything I just mentioned, as well as all the social media stuff, they'll be in the show notes for good measure. I think that's about it. Let's do it. Here is BJ Barham of American Aquarium.
Obviously, like this record that you guys have coming out, you've done a really, really great job of keeping it secret. I feel like this kind of record right here has to have, like the intentions, the ideas had to stem from quarantine life. Is that where this record, this collection of covers is rooted in?
It all started at the beginning of quarantine. I was doing 50 covers in 50 days to kind of kick off the quarantine. And it wasn't just for the fans. It was for me. It was to kind of keep me and my musical mind challenged every day. So I'd wake up every morning, I'd learn a new song, I'd cover it. And for the first couple weeks, I did a live stream every night. I was just trying my best to entertain people throughout, being stuck at home. And so I covered everything from, the Tiger King, Joe Exotic songs to all of the 90s rock that I was kind of radio rock that I was raised on, through the college rock of the early 2000s that really influenced me. But I found that the covers that really resonated the most with people and the covers that I had the most fun recording were kind of these early 90s prime country covers. They seemed to get the most traction. And then I started to realize that I wasn't the only person that spent most of the late 80s, early 90s listening to that kind of music. I'm not going to say it's the greatest music ever recorded, but it definitely holds a special place in my heart just because of the time and place and the memories that it immediately takes me back to as soon as I hear those songs. And so everybody kind of was joking like, hey, you should make a record of these, you should make a record of your covers and put them out, and we kind of joked about it. But then we got together with the band in August for a live stream from Athens, Georgia. And I kind of joked with the boys, I'm like, guys, what if I rented out a studio for a couple of days? Would you guys be down for doing a record of just 90s country covers? And they're like, yes. And so it was pretty unanimous from the start that we knew exactly what genre we were going to cover. And then came the arduous task of narrowing it down to 10 songs. So that was, I think, the hardest part of making this record was deciding what songs to cut, because there's so many amazing tunes that came out of that era. And so we narrowed it down to the songs that, people are going to hear on this record. And we tried our best not to do any of the giant, like, monolithic stars of the day. We didn't do a Garth tune or a George Strait song or a Shania song or a Reba song. We tried our best to keep it to, A- to B level country celebrities. And I feel like we did a pretty good job.
Yeah. It's when I was looking at the list, the track list here, I think you guys do a good job of, like, as you said right there, like the A- to like C+, in that range, that tier.
Yeah.
I've kind of done in the past a 90s country pyramid of like tiers. And I think like I'm going off the top of my head here, like tier 1 is that Garth and George and Reba. And then like tier 2, which is like right underneath it, of course, really, really strong, is the Shanias and the Dixie Chicks or the Chicks now, and a few of those. And then like you're hitting right now, what this record is all the all those like really, really great B and C class guys. So
Yeah,
I think you guys do a good job of like capturing the essence of the era.
yeah. Don't get me wrong. Like we've got some people that I would still consider. I would consider Brooks and Dunn an A level. But we chose a pretty deep sing as far as Brooks and Dunn singles go. Anytime you choose the one that Kix Brooks sings instead of Ronnie Dunn, I would say that you're choosing some deeper catalog stuff. We did a Toby Keith tune, and I would argue that he's up there as far as a 90s guys. I really think he hit his prime in the late 90s, early 2000s, but I feel like that we represented the era well enough to where if you were a huge fan of the genre, you'll appreciate some of the deep cuts. And even if you're just kind of a novice 90s country guy, you'll know at least 5 of these artists. I feel like we didn't make it too obscure.
Right. Yeah. Like these are all like still like top 10 hits,
Oh,
yeah.
100%. And that was our goal, was to make sure. So the rule was it had to be recorded between 1990 and 1995. And it had to be a top 10 hit. And that was kind of our criteria. And so we went through and we made a pretty hefty list. We probably have a list of about 100 tunes. We went through and narrowed it down. And it was a conscious effort because I think the early 90s was, we could argue even into the late 90s, was the last time that I feel like females were represented pretty proportionately on country radio. I remember very clearly that Patty Loveless was a star and Faith Hill was a star. Now I can name you maybe 3 or 4 women that consistently have singles on country radio.
Right.
But I feel like in the early 90s, it was a lot fairer shot for female country singers to be able to get a hit. And so I definitely wanted to show that on this record. I definitely wanted to make sure that people were aware that this wasn't just a boys club in the early 90s. You had Winona, you had Shania, you had Reba, who everything they touched turned to gold for those 5 years. I'm not talking about just like top 10 hits. I'm talking about consecutive number 1 hits. Mm-hmm. And so we narrowed it down. I made sure that I wanted to have 5 male vocalists, 5 female vocalists. And so with those criteria, we went at it. And don't get me wrong, the 5 or 6 songs that made it to the final round of cutting, that's why there's a volume 1. I can almost guarantee there's going to be a volume 2 just because of how much fun we had making this record.
Yeah. It feels like this kind of record is very much like something that you could do this 50 times and like still have fun the 50th time because like there's just the wealth of material there,
Yeah. And it was really easy for us because, we only it took us 2.5 days to make this record. So we went into a studio. I told the boys what songs we were going to play. Everybody did their homework, learned up on the songs, and we got in the studio and just hit record. Like I said, for the listener out there that's kind of undoctrinated with the record making process, it usually takes 2 to 3 weeks for a band to cut a record. And so the fact that we were able to go in 2.5 days and make something that we can be really proud of, and not only can we be proud of it, it was a lot of fun to make. It wasn't this, heavy, a hard work task where we had to like constantly overthink arrangement and constantly overthink each lyric. Like it was, these are already hits. These songs, there was no really thinking about it. Like these songs are already proven to be top 10 hits. So it was really easy to kind of go in and just kind of put our own spin on it, because it would have been very easy just to go into the studio and just record these verbatim, just like the records. But I feel like this has a very American Aquarium sound to it. And I also feel like people, I may have pulled the curtain a little bit too much and showed just how much 90s country influenced our sound.
Right.
Because a lot of people, like we like to pride ourselves on, it's the hipster in us. We like to list Drive-By Truckers and Wilco and Lucero and Jason Isbell as influences. But I would say I was just as much influenced by Sawyer Brown as I was Whiskey Town. From the time I was born until I went to college, I listened to country radio. That's where I developed an ear for melody. That's where I developed an ear for storytelling in less than 4 minutes. Like, so many of your songwriters today like to think that like they came out of the womb listening to like Fugazi and Townes Van Zandt, and that's absolute bullshit. Right. Anybody born in the mid 80s to mid 90s listened to exactly what I listened to, and that was radio. And what was on the radio on country stations? You were listening to Some Girls Do. You were listening to Try to Think About Elvis. You were listening to She's in Love with the Boy. And if you say you didn't, you're lying. You're lying to yourself. You're lying to your friends. Nobody's that hip.
Yeah, that's one of those things I was thinking about getting ready for this, was that, we've had these conversations about that Americana, the alt country influence, right? The Isbells and the Whiskey Towns and Wilcos, as you mentioned. But after seeing this track listing, I was like, man, a lot of these songs right here, I can very much see that in the American Aquarium, I guess like the equation, the math equation, if we're getting to what the American Aquarium sound is, because, a lot of these songs, they check off that blue collar aspect. They check off the short narrative, as you mentioned in there. And obviously, like, just kind of that, all these songs have a little bit of that rock edge to it, that tinge, even though, exactly. they're country songs. And yeah, it all makes sense, and, if there's one theme that you can get through this, other than obviously the 90s thing, is that these songs are all within that blue collar world.
For sure. And I think that's what country music was founded upon. I think only until recently, only until the 2000s, did we really lose track of that. Did we really lose track of, the small town fictional narrative? Because that's the thing I love about the songwriters from the early 90s is they spoke well within the Southern lexicon, and they told stories that were not only kind of humorous at sometimes, like everyone could relate to these stories. It wasn't just about dirt roads, pickup trucks, blue eyes, blonde hair, blue jeans, Bud Light. It wasn't about just like the Mad Libs that we hear on the radio today. It was like really thoughtful songwriting. And I think that's something that don't get me wrong, there's still a few singer songwriters on the radio today that you're like, man, at least somebody's trying to keep it alive. But there's so many people butchering it at the same time.
Yeah. One of the big things that I've talked about with this podcast, with the Neon Eon, is when you step back and you look at all those top 10 hits from the decade, the era, you realize that there's so many adult themes, so many adult conversations that were happening on the radio that just kind of have, kind of disappeared. You can see a little bit of some of those things happening still every once in a while, but they're way more few and far between these days, where back then adult conversations about divorce and about like actual loss or like hard work, those were themes that were always on the radio.
100%. I think that's what made it. That's why you saw such a rise in popularity in country music in the early 90s, was because there was these. It wasn't just, country music got kind of the rap of being like the hillbilly music for a long time. And I think that the 90s, once they started incorporating, the rock elements of the late 80s into some of these songs, like you can hear it on every one of the big country tracks, don't get me wrong, I consider very much, it's still country music, but there's a really great rock element. Like you could argue that like the early 90s was really just country rock with, except for the theme. The theme was definitely rooted in country, but the presentation, the stage show, that's where we started seeing Garth Brooks fly around like fucking Peter Pan.
Smashing guitars.
That's where we saw smashing guitars. That's where we saw like really big electric guitar solos. We started seeing stadium tours. We started seeing, you know, they didn't look like country singers, you know, they looked like rockers in tight blue jeans. And I think something about that resonated with me. Something about that resonated with me as a kid. I thought it was cool. It's funny because like Sawyer Brown's one of those bands for me that like they did no wrong, I think. And Mark Miller wrote all those songs, all those really great Sawyer Brown hits. Mark Miller wrote those. The lead singer wrote those. And that's something that always earns my respect quicker than anything, is when you see a band have this larger than life success and then realize that they did it the right way. They didn't hire a team of 7 people to come write a song about a back road. They sat down, wrote from the heart, and got a hit out of it, and then, you know, repeated it and repeated it and repeated it. And that's why, you know, I knew that Sawyer Brown would be one of those bands. It was just about choosing which Sawyer Brown song.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't a matter of does Sawyer Brown make the list. It's like, okay, so how many Sawyer Brown songs is too many Sawyer Brown songs? So we picked this one, and, you know, the band, you know, Sawyer Brown has heard our version, and they sent me like a really nice Instagram message and was like, we love what you did with the song. Hope to cross paths. They sent me like a happy birthday message. And I was like, if I could go back and tell like 10-year-old me, like one day Sawyer Brown's going to hear you doing like a studio karaoke version of one of their songs and they're going to dig it. I think that would make 10-year-old me's day just as much as it made 36-year-old me's day.
Yeah. Mark Miller and like Aaron Tippin are like the two guys back in the 90s who like consistently worked out, and like you could, it doesn't sound far-fetched to put the scenario out there. You know, he changed your oil before like going on stage and performed. Like that's what that's what's in my head always is like these guys were like, you know, did the bench press before, you know, going out and performing, you know, rotated your tires.
They were also showmen. Like I think that they and I think I can't speak for them, but I would guarantee by how they look, the cutoff jeans, the bandanas, the working out, the blue collar anthems, they took just as much from Springsteen as they did from the country superstars of the 70s and 80s. You know, you're talking about in 86, you're talking about Born in the USA was the biggest record in the country. You know, and let's think back to what Springsteen looked like in 86. He was a jacked working class dude, wore a bandana, cut off shirt, and blue jeans and work boots. Mm-hmm. Now let's go over and look at what every country star looked like in the late 80s, early 90s. They looked like Bruce Springsteen. And they were singing these blue collar anthems. Yeah, they might have had a fiddle or a band. They were these kind of rocking blue collar anthems. And so, you know, I know why I fell in love with it when I was 10, but I think one of the biggest reasons I still have an affinity for this era of music is because every one of my influence that I still note to this day kind of all fell under that same thing, you know, and Sawyer Brown's no different. Sammy Kershaw is no different. You know, these songs were, not only were they catchy and really great hooks and really great choruses, in less than 3.5 minutes, they gave you 3 verses and told a complete story that either made you laugh or feel something. And that's something that's just straight up missing from country radio today. Barring, you know, a very few, exempt few.
Yeah. You know, look, one of the things that I've obviously, like, there's probably, you know, 4 or 5 actual reasons why country music really blew up during the 90s. But, you know, one of the things is is obviously the introduction of the CD. It became way more easy, accessible. I think like two, like as far as, you know, little BJ listening to the country radio in rural North Carolina, listening to what was happening on his dad's radio in the cab of his truck. That's happening, but there's also like somehow amazingly the guy like driving on the interstate back and forth to work in Los Angeles. You know, he's tapping into the radio just as well. And so I think like all those little things helped boost and made country go way more mainstream than it had ever before. And as you mentioned, all those like 80s, late 80s rock feels and sounds, I think like all of that was necessary because also at the time, you know, country music, you mentioned like the arena tours, that wasn't necessarily happening before then.
Oh, no.
And, you know, if you're having to play those kind of shows, you have to make it bigger because, you know, you're wanting to make it where those people who are looking down at you and you're like the size of an ant, you have to make it big enough for the show to actually, you know, resonate with them just as much as those people who can actually see the show.
Yeah, I think it's important with those big arena shows. You know, I read somewhere, you know, Springsteen said he is trying to entertain the guy in the very, very last seat at the very, very back. He's like, if I can entertain that guy, then that means I've entertained everyone from me to him. And, you know, that's not easy. Like for anybody that's ever stood on stage in front of 1,000+ people, it's not easy to entertain 1,000 people. Now try to think about entertaining 20,000 people, 40,000 people, 60,000 people. Like that's a level of showmanship that like, I don't think too many people on this planet could do. And you see the rise in it in the early 90s of a lot of your country that they started doing these like super packages to where you'd have 3 guys or gals with, you know, top 5 singles on the same package in the same arena, you know, playing for 4 hours a night. That wasn't a country show. It used to be country shows were honky tonks and like, you know, a 2-night stand at Billy Bob's and, you know, moving on to the next one. And now you're seeing, and now you're seeing arenas and now you're seeing football stadiums and, you know, hell, Garth Brooks did Central fucking Park. There's a huge rise in the mainstream. I remember Achy Breaky Heart was a cultural phenomenon. That wasn't just a country phenomenon. That was everywhere you went, everybody knew that song. And I think, you know, we saw quite a few of those in the early 90s.
Yeah. And, you know, that's like the Billy Ray Cyrus thing, you know, people act like he was like a one-hit wonder. And I guess like in the general, if we're looking at like the pop charts, I guess he had one hit, but he was a lot bigger in country in general. He had more hits than just Achy Breaky Heart.
Oh, dude, some gave all, dude.
Yeah. And then
Man.
Also like the one that I think is hilarious now is it was Romeo by Dolly Parton, but featuring like Billy Ray Cyrus and like Pam Tillis and Mary Chapin Carpenter and a few other people.
Oh, dude, I remember that video. He was the hunk.
Yeah.
He was hunk in a Dolly Parton song. Like, can you imagine? Like, I'll retire on that. Like, put that on my repertoire, and I'm done. It's like played the tank top beefcake in a Dolly Parton song, and then he retired. That's all I would do.
That's like the one music video. If there's one music video I can vividly remember as a kid, that's like in that top 5 because like CMT was always playing music videos and that was one of those.
Such a fun video too.
Yeah. You mentioned how like, you know, one of your favorite aspects of the era is that sense of humor. You have, I noticed a couple of Dennis Lindy songs on here. He wrote Queen of My Double Wide Trailer. John Deere Green, Callin' Baton Rouge, and a bunch of other stuff like that. I always thought he did such a great job of having that, that little bit of quirkiness within the song.
Yeah, there's not many songs that you can sing that are top 10 hits that mention onion rings and calling someone the Charlie Daniels of the torque wrench in the same song. Like Dennis Lindy was one of those guys. He also wrote Earl Had to Die or Goodbye Earl for the Dixie Chicks. And it blew my mind when I realized that he created this fake community, and all songs take place in that fake community. Like there's a really great interview with him. So like the Earl from Queen of My Double Wide Trailer is the same Earl that the Chicks kill in Earl Had to Die. So the Chicks ended up killing the Charlie Daniels of the torque wrench, 10 years later. And I always think that's fun to go back and listen to his songs and connect the dots between the characters. I think it's really, really, really brilliant. And he had so much success that, if you do that as an indie songwriter, there's going to be like 10 people that you're going to be like Sufjan Stevens, and people are going to be like, oh, he did this really cool thing. But like when you're doing it on national radio with back to back hits, like that's a special songwriter. Like he was a different breed of songwriter. And I don't think it's a coincidence that of the 10 songs we pick from the 90s country era, 2 of them are Dennis Lindy songs. He was that good. He's that good.
Yeah, I remember whenever I was going back, this is probably a couple of years ago, I was listening to Queen of My Double Wide Trailer, and I was like, Earl, okay, the Charlie Daniels of the torque wrench, of course, like you kind of always remember that. And then it dawned on me that both those songs were Dennis Lindy songs, and it was like, oh, that has to be the same Earl. And then all of a sudden, you just kind of go down that rabbit hole of trying to figure out the Dennis Lindy canon. And I know there's a song, I can't remember who ended up cutting it, but there is a song that references Billy Bob and Charlene of John Deere Green as well. It's not like it never became like a big hit, and it wasn't recorded by like a, one of those A+ recording artists, but there's a song out there. If I remember what it is, I'll throw it into the show notes for all y'all listeners. But yeah, just the canon of it is amazing. Just to have that, the track record that he has there is just incredible. It's the Callin' Baton Rouge, and it's John Deere Green and Bubba Shot the Jukebox and all these like obviously identifiable songs that people should and know. What's kind of crazy is he also like produced a couple of like Mickey Newberry records back in the day.
Yeah, I know. He wrote "Burnin' Love" for Elvis.
Mm-hmm.
Like the dude had such a ridiculous career that kind of transcended just like pop country radio. Like he, to be a fly on the wall in that dude's life, I would have loved to have been able to sit down and ask questions.
Yeah. He was from Abilene, Texas, of all places. And yeah.
Wild.
Yeah. I don't know if have you seen like the like his like, I guess like Dennis Lindy, the town, have you seen a photo of that by chance?
I have not.
I'll send you a photo.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of crazy how, just like the canon, as you said, like just to give a little bit more detail on this world is like, apparently like he would wake up every morning and kind of, as he was drinking his coffee, had these characters and would just kind of place them in town and see, oh, okay, well, what would happen with these interactions? What would happen if this happened with these two characters? And that's how a lot of these songs ended up getting written. So
and that's so good. Like as a songwriter, to be able to have that kind of perspective and be able to kind of hover above your little fake city and watch these fictional characters interact with each other. That's next level talent. Like it's hard to write one song with fictional characters, but when you're writing multiple #1 hits where you just introduce these characters to each other in different songs, like it's pretty mind blowing.
I wanted to break really quick to talk about Burn Vodka one last time for a Thomas Mooney's Cocktail Minute. Now, as you know, by no stretch of the imagination am I a mixologist or seasoned bartender, but here are a few of my favorite go-tos when it comes to Burn Vodka. Now, historically, Burn Vodka has its roots in shots. As you'd expect, a round of pre-stage apple, watermelon, or pickle burn shots is like a rite of passage at the Blue Light. In fact, they're necessary for a post-show celebration as well. Now, my favorite also happens to be the easiest to make, the pickle burn. 2 parts pickle juice, 1 part Burn Vodka. It really is that simple. As Ricky Van Shelton would say, I am a simple man. Now, don't underestimate the possibilities for burn though. This isn't a novelty party shot. Try this one on for size. Let's expand that burn shot into something called a farmer's tan. Take that pickle burn shot and throw it in a bottle of Topo Chico for a new spin on a ranch water. You can throw it over ice, but personally, I just take a swig of the Topo, throw it in the bottle, and you're good to go. Or how about a sunburn? That's 2 ounces of Burn Vodka, 2 ounces of pineapple juice, 1 ounce mango juice, squeeze in some fresh lime juice, and top it off with a Jamaican-style ginger beer. Telling y'all, that is super refreshing. There's plenty more recipes over on theburnvodka.com, and they consistently add new favorites to the site as well. All right, this has been a Thomas Mooney's Cocktail Minute presented by Burn Vodka. Now let's get back to the episode.
One of my other favorite little things that I've absolutely just love about the era is, and we've talked about how, like, you know, you're able to like weave, and you've plucked some really great songs that all kind of talk about these blue collar themes. But one of my favorite things is that there's still all these very distinct voices on the radio at the time. And I can say that both in like style as far as personality goes, but also just like in the way people sang and the way people actually like their singing voices. Now I think like there's just the generic general Southern accent that's being used on the radio. But on here, like back in the 90s, there's like very distinct singing styles between the Faith Hills and the Rebas. Like Reba sounds just like Reba, and no one else is sounding like her. And Shania, or you mentioned like Ronnie Dunn, Brooks and Dunn, right? It sounds so different than Kix Brooks. All these like distinct voices.
Like like as a kid, I could tell you the minute that Dwight Yoakam started singing. I could tell you the Travis Tritt started singing. I could tell you the minute that a Brooks and Dunn song came on, even if I had never heard it. Their voices were just so unique. They were amazing voices, and that's the problem. Is those voices were incredible. Like you said, now you just get lost in the mundane, you know, bro redneck, or the faux redneck, accents on the radio today. Not only were those dudes extremely, do they sound actually country? They were really great singers. Like if you ever want to like really just hurt any of your singer friends' feelings, play them, like go on YouTube and find a picture of like Ronnie Dunn singing Neon Moon acoustic. And you'll realize very quickly, like that man did not need a studio trick ever. That man just had a voice that transcended everybody else's. I think it was kind of the last hurrah for like super talented people to be on country radio. And by super talented, I mean, they wrote songs, they sang songs, they played instruments. Even in the early 90s, even in this kind of golden era of prime country, we started seeing that turn to where you had the people not writing their own songs. You had the people not just holding a guitar on stage, not playing the guitar, which is, you know, I always joke that's the snowball at the very top of the mountain, that somebody let a tiny little snowball go thinking nobody would notice it. And fast forward to 2021, and, you know, the snowball has decimated the villages at the bottom of the mountain. let's put it this way. I make a living singing songs. I am not the best singer, but I can hold my own usually. Making this record tested me in a way that I've never been tested in a studio, because if you ever want to humble yourself as a vocalist, try to sing a Faith Hill song. Just try. I dare everybody out there just to pick up a microphone and record yourself singing a Faith Hill song. The amount of vocal gymnastics that woman can do in one song. Same way goes for Trisha Yearwood. We had to make a couple key changes for me to even be able to sing some of these songs. When I say tested, I mean tested in a good way. I really got outside of my comfort zone as a singer on this record, because it was one part me trying to do it justice, two parts me just having fun at karaoke with a really, really great band.
Yeah. Like that's what I'm talking about right there, is like the distinct voices, the embrace of that personality when it comes to those artists. The, Faith Hill, Trisha, you guys have a Mary Chapin Carpenter cut on this record, which is like she's one of my all-time favorites of the era. But
she was my introduction to Lucinda Williams.
Yeah, that's how I feel like it has to be for a lot of people right there, because of Passionate Kisses, Yeah. I guess like what I also love so much is this was also back when it felt like so many artists had a little bit longer of a runway. It's kind of mind-boggling to look back then and see how many first records, debut, first 4 or 5 singles that just kind of did okay and not like, didn't have to be that number one hit. There's plenty of people who came out of the gate running and just like, never looking back, but it's an era still where if you quote unquote flopped or you didn't do as well as the record label thought you should have done that first record, they didn't just cut you and then, there goes your career. There's like that second record that did well. They gave you enough allowance to find yourself or embrace whatever that voice was, that the reason why they signed you to begin with. And I don't know if that's happening enough these days.
Yeah, they were still developing artists back in the early 90s. A lot of, artist development is something we don't see today. If you get signed to a major deal and you don't have a number one hit, you get dropped. Think about if Bob Dylan got dropped after his first record. Think about if Bruce Springsteen got dropped after his first record. It usually takes 2 or 3 records, especially for those 2 that I just listed, to find their voice. And artists, labels used to understand that. They used to understand, like, if you came out of the gate with a number one hit, great, fantastic. Like, we weren't expecting that, but we'll take it. But most labels back then realized that you needed to build a name, an image, and get people used to hearing the voice. And that's something that just does not happen today. You got guys who get signed to the major deal, record one EP, it doesn't do anything, and then they get dropped. And that's unfortunate, because think about how many, country superstars we're missing out on just because they're not taking their first single to number one.
Yeah. Like if you go back and like look at Tim McGraw's first record, it's not like, I think most people think of their introduction as the one that has like, Don't Take the Girl and like, Down on the Farm and stuff like that. Like those big hits. He had a record before that is just, pedestrian. It's him trying to figure himself out, trying to figure out what he's going to sound like. And, today, I don't know if that happens, if he gets that second record. And it's probably, if he does, it's with, a different label, and it's like, or an independent release, and he doesn't get those same cuts. He's not allowed to like even get those songs. He's cutting different songs that, and then there's someone else, like there's probably, is, I don't know, I'm blanking on a name here, but is like Kenny Chesney getting those songs instead.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you remember your first 90s country concert?
I didn't go to concerts growing up. I lived in Reedsville, and so my parents did not really go see live music. That wasn't their thing. We used to listen to records at the house every Saturday night. Like, we'd get my dad's office, and he had a turntable, and we'd listen to records. But I can't recall my parents ever going to see a musical or a concert. So I didn't start going to see, occasionally they would come to the Greensboro Coliseum, which was about 30 minutes from my house. But the Greensboro Coliseum was not gigantic. So you couldn't get like the big artists. You had to go to Raleigh or Charlotte usually to see these like, big amphitheater artists. So I didn't really go to shows until I got to college. And then, so I missed out on that whole era of going to see, these monolithic country stars, just because it wasn't something my parents did. And I'm very much from a town where if your parents don't do it, neither do you.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people can relate to that. It wasn't until I got out on my own, I was 18, and actually got to go see, like, my first concert ever was like with a youth group. I went to go see like Third Day and Stephen Curtis Chapman at the Greensboro Coliseum for like, youth ministry day or whatever. It was very much a different place. Especially fast forward and look at what I do for a living. It's hard for some people to believe that, but like, I just didn't go to shows. We didn't go to shows. My family didn't go to shows, and not a lot of shows came to town. You got to think, I lived 30 minutes near like the 7th biggest city in North Carolina. Like, we weren't like, a premier entertainment destination for a lot of these country singers. So I think my first show I went and saw ever was that Third Day Stephen Curtis Chapman show. And then the first show I ever went to see, I was dating a girl who wanted to go see Jimmy Buffett. And I was 18. I was a senior in high school, and we went and saw Jimmy Buffett, which is really embarrassing to admit. But then I went to college. I moved to Raleigh, and that's where I realized that like independent music existed. And that's where I started falling in love with kind of more, I guess, what would be considered college rock by today's standards. And I was going to see probably 5 or 6 shows a night, because we have a pretty legendary club here in North Carolina called the Cat's Cradle in Chapel Hill. And I was making that trip because that was only a 30-minute drive. So I was making that trip, 5 or 6 nights a week to see Josh Ritter, to see the Drive-By Truckers, to see Lucero, to see the Killers, I saw the White Stripes, I saw the Strokes, I fell in love with just loud music. And then fast forward, that was 2002. So then in 2006, I start the band. And so at that point, I'd only been seeing live shows for 4 years of my life. And I was 21.
Yeah. I imagine also, like, if the closest shows coming to you, as far as being few and far between, they're also probably, how touring goes. Those are probably like Wednesdays and Thursdays and Tuesdays.
Exactly. They were filler shows. Like, North Carolina has all, except for Charlotte and Raleigh, they've definitely become a lot bigger since the cities have. But North Carolina used to be like the off day between Atlanta and DC. And so like a band that was going from Atlanta to DC they would make a stopover. So it was always a Sunday night show or a Monday night show after, like a 3-night stand in Atlanta. They'd come and play, some bullshit off night, school night show. So it never made sense for me to go see these bands. Like, don't get me wrong, I would have loved to if I knew that I could. I was at that age where I just thought that these superstars lived in my radio.
Right. Yeah. I always had like this idea that, anyone who picked up a guitar at the time was like, Elvis Presley at that time, at least like monetarily,
Oh,
that's the funniest thing about like the disconnection between, 8-year-old Thomas and now, or listening to whatever was on the radio.
Yeah, for me, it was the same thing. Like, I never thought about pursuing music professionally because I only knew two kinds of musicians. There was, the uncle that had a guitar that would cover Merle Haggard songs at the cookout kind of drunkenly. And then there was Tim McGraw, and there was no in between. There was no, there was no middle. And then when I went to college and I started discovering indie rock, and I started discovering like small rock clubs in Raleigh and Durham and Chapel Hill that would like let local bands play their own original music in front of like 20 people. Like, it blew my mind that like these places existed. Like, what do you mean you'll pay me $100 to get up with my friends and play songs in front of our friends? Like, you mean I can make a living doing this? And that's once I realized that my songwriting, that not only were my friends telling me my songwriting was good, but when random people were coming to shows and paying $5 to see me, that like maybe I could make a living doing this. And that's when, I started taking touring very seriously. And a year after we start the band, I'm playing 200 shows a year just because, I fell in love with, holy shit, I never knew this was possible. Like, I always thought it was like Uncle Donnie or Tim McGraw. Like, and
right. I'm
very, very comfortable admitting now that there's a huge middle ground that you can make like you cannot, like, there is and we're operating in that era right now. It's like, we're not superstars. We don't have songs on the radio. We're not selling out amphitheaters, but we make a very comfortable living playing original music. And if you'd have told 12-year-old, hell, if you'd have told 18-year-old me that, I wouldn't have believed you. I would have never thought it was possible because I'd never seen it with my own eyes. The only musicians that I knew were superstars. And I think the turning point for me in my life was realizing that you can make a living and you can support a family and you can buy a house and also not be a superstar. You can play music professionally and not be Tim McGraw or George Strait. And I'm completely content with that.
Yeah. And you're not getting like hounded every time you go to the grocery store,
Exactly. Like, I think there's a really cool middle ground. And I think most people spend their entire career in that middle ground. Especially if you do it for longer than 4 or 5 years, you're above the local guy at the open mic night, but you're not Tim McGraw. So like, you're in this weird middle ground, but like the middle ground has so many different tiers all on its own.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we're technically a middle tier band, but we're in a bus. Like, none of us work normal, like, straight jobs when we're home. Like, we play music for a living and we enjoy playing music for a living. And we're very comfortable playing music for a living. And I think that's something that a lot of kids, especially where I'm from, just didn't know because we'd never seen it.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So like, obviously, as you mentioned, American Aquarium gets started around 2006. And I'm assuming that, like any other band, when you first start out, like, you don't just like start the band and you got like 20 originals in the set or anything like that. I'm assuming that a bunch of the covers that you were working with at the time were from that college rock scene. But was there any of these touchstones from back in the 90s or anything like that? Was there like I feel like almost all bands ended up covering 2 Dozen Roses. Was there any of these kind of songs in there in the mix?
No, I think I'm one of the anomalies. When I started the band, I had pretty much all the songs from Antique Hearts and Bible in the Bottle written already. So when I started the band, we could play for 2 hours, all original, no covers. Like, we've never been a cover band. Like, we occasionally, like, and only in the last couple of years have we, pick one cover for a tour and cover it. We've done some John Prine tunes, some Neil Young songs, Gillian Welch,
Willis Allen Ramsey.
Willis Allen Ramsey. We'll occasionally, we've done a lot of Springsteen over the years. We'll occasionally do a cover, but I've been very fortunate to where my entire career has been based. And don't get me wrong, early on, people wanted us to play covers, and I would just tell them to go fuck themselves. And that's why we played in front of about 10 people for 5 years. Is because we used to give people what they wanted. I was like, if you're going to come see me, you're going to come see the originals. And luckily for me, the originals got a lot better than those first couple records. But yeah, I think I'm an anomaly there, because I think most bands I talk to start playing covers or learn how to play guitar by playing covers. And I was the opposite. I learned how to play guitar solely so I could write, to facilitate songwriting. I didn't learn guitar so I could impress a girl with like a Sublime cover. I learned how to play guitar so that I could put words that I'd written, put my shitty poetry, turn my shitty poetry into songs. And, so I think and everybody else in my band learned how to play music by covering other people or joining cover bands or starting a high school band where they did 90% covers. And, I kind of missed out on that. The reason I started playing guitar was because I wanted to write songs.
Yeah. No. Well, anyways, here's Wonderwall for BJ Ball.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. As we get older, it's fun to like every couple weeks throw in a different cover and, watch. I like to pick covers that maybe, a good cover for me is a cover that 30% of the crowd knows. If 30% of the crowd knows it and the other, 70% of the crowd thinks it's your own song, that's a great cover. That's a good cover for me.
Yeah, that's where like Willis and Allen Ramsey comes in handy right there.
Yeah, well, and I'd say outside of the state of Texas, 95% of people think that's our song. Inside the state of Texas, and I think that goes again to a lot of people in Texas. I think Texans are exposed to live music at such an early age. They're conditioned to go to shows. It's not a foreign concept to go to a show a week when you live in the state of Texas. It's not are you going to a show this weekend? It's what show are you going to?
Right.
And I think Texans get really spoiled because the rest of the country is not like that. The rest of the country is very much a Friday, Saturday night crowd. Unless you've done the legwork and built your name up to where you could draw a ticket on a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Thursday. Texas is this really rare place where live music kind of, reigns king. And every kid I know has pictures with all the country superstars when they came through and played their county fair or the chili cook-off or, whatever local honky tonk they played on their way up, it's crazy to me to see like the guys from like Mike and the Moon Pies or like Jamie Lynn or somebody like that posting pictures of them with like these celebrities as kids playing their their county fair.
Yeah.
I think Texas has kind of always been a hotbed for one, live music, but two, exposing, like it's part of the culture. Going and seeing shows is something the punk kids do. It's something the hipsters do. It's something the rednecks do. It's something old people do. And it's something college kids do. Like nowhere else in the country supports. And as an outsider, I feel very comfortable saying this. It's one of the reasons that we play in Texas so much. And it's one of the reasons that we've found such a home in Texas is because not only do they like our songs and support our songs, they support live music. And we tour a lot. And so, especially I'd say from 2012 to 2016, 17, we were playing Texas like 2 weeks every few months. We were in Texas a lot. And it's because people will come see you play in Roscoe on a Tuesday night at the Lumberyard or come see you at Magnolia Motor Lounge on a Monday night. There's nowhere else in the country that you can play kind of, B and C markets in a state and pack a house on a Tuesday. But Texas is one of those places.
Yeah. You mentioned a minute ago about, no one's born with the Towns record and the Fugazi record. Here in Texas, actually, that's the case. You right out the womb, you're given a Steve Earle record and a Robert Earl Keen live #2 dinner record. So that's what happens. It's just ingrained. So
oh, for sure. Like and Texas has this really, really great duality because yes, you have Lyle Lovett. Yes, you have Towns and Guy and that kind of lineage of troubadours, but you also there's the Texas, pop country scene.
Yeah.
And the bands that, don't make it in Nashville. So but they're superstars in the state of Texas, that are definitely not Townes Van Zandt and Guy Clark. They're more the radio country of the late 90s. And way less of the, rooted in songwriting tradition like Steve Earle and Guy Clark and Townes Van Zandt. So that's another thing, especially being an outsider from Texas, that's really kind of weird to watch. Is Texas really loves Texas music, but they support two very, very different factions of Texas music. One being way popular than the other. But it's kind of crazy because as an outsider, I think that the two things that those, a fan of Hayes Carl and a fan of, Parker McCollum, they can still hear, a Brooks and Dunn song and both of them are going to dig the shit out of it. and I think that's a cool thing.
Yeah. That's, mentioning all like the Steve Earles and stuff. And this all ties back to the whole, the 90s country having adult themes. It's been surprising a little bit, like talking with some of these people who, back in the 80s, it's surprising in the way of like, there's more Guy Clark stories that I've heard on, from people during the Neon Eon than even New Slang. And, you got to remember like Lyle Lovett and Steve Earle and like Rodney Crowell were all like signed to like major label deals and we're actually getting some radio play. And I can't remember. I know what it is. Steve Earle kind of dubbed it like the great credibility scare of the late 80s. I don't know if you've ever heard that before, but
I've never heard that, but that is about as accurate as it gets. It used to, and it used to be that way. It used to be that good songwriters got famous. It's how it was. And, for better or for worse, I think in the early 90s, we start seeing the genre move away from that. And it becomes more of the, and I'll always credit it to music videos. Before music videos, you didn't have to be a pretty guy. All you had to do is have a good voice and write good songs. And after music videos become like a norm, then they started choosing the prettiness over the talent, and they would let the talent slide if you were pretty enough. And I think that's what got us to 2020, where we currently are in the country music landscape.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's it to me it's very much one of those things where it's such a surprise how we've gotten here, but you go back and connect all those dots and, you can see where, as you said, like the little snowball rolling down the hill, rolling down the mountain. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's where it's 30 years ago, you start giving up one little piece of integrity to sell a few more records. And then a year later, you give up a little bit more. Fast forward 30 years and you've given up a lot. You've given up a lot of what made the genre. There's nobody on country radio today that embodies what Willie Nelson or Waylon Jennings or Merle Haggard embodied. I hate to, they name drop them enough.
Yeah.
in their songs these days, but like none of them stand for what those guys stood for. Like, and also look back, like none of those guys were pretty motherfuckers. Like they were rough around the edges, but there was one thing they did. They wrote songs, they played their songs, and they sang their songs. And, you know, if we could get back to that, if we could get back to, like, you know, a modern example of that's Jason Isbell. Jason Isbell would have been a fucking superstar in 1970. He was just born in the wrong era.
Right. Yeah. Get someone named Earnest on the radio again. That's
Yeah.
Can we just have that as a simple ask?
That needs to be a t-shirt. Can we please have someone, you know, named Keith on the radio again?
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna make a Neon Eon shirt out of that then. We'll do that.
I will buy at least one of those.
I think it's a good place to end it on right there. The great credibility scare of the late 80s.
I'm stealing that, man. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, we could probably talk on this for 3 more hours, but I'll
Man, we could go.
So yeah, it's been great talking with you. Thank you so much for coming on, and I think people are gonna enjoy this surprise record here. So
yeah, I hope so. Like I said, it was a lot of fun to make, and I think it gives people a glimpse, almost too much of a glimpse, into what influenced me as a kid. You know, I didn't go into this thinking that 90s country played such a foundational role in me falling in love with music, but it's very clear through some of these songs. You're like, holy shit, like a lot of what I love about music came from this era.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
I hope people get as much out of this record and have as much fun with this record as we did making it, because, you know, the last 2 records, Things Change and Lamentations, were extremely heavy records emotionally and musically, and you know, thematically, they're just heavy records. And so it was really nice to go into a studio and make a fun record, and just have a good time and cut loose with my friends and hit record. And so I hope that translates to people, and I hope people get as much out of it as we did putting into it.
All right, that is it for this episode. Huge thanks to BJ Barham. Be sure to check out Slappers, Bangers, and Certified Twangers Volume 1 by American Aquarium, out today. Go check out our presenting partners over at Burn Vodka. And yeah, I'll see y'all later for another episode of the Neon Eon.